Imagine a place where the brightest minds of the ancient world came together under a single roof. Within its walls rested hundreds of thousands of scrolls, works on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, history, and discoveries gathered from civilizations stretching across 3 continents. It was more than a library. It was humanity's greatest attempt to preserve knowledge. Now imagine that knowledge disappearing, not slowly through the passage of time, but in fire, in smoke, in silence. For more than 2,000 years, the Library of Alexandria has inspired myths, legends, and endless debate. Some believe it contained every important book of the ancient world. Others imagine it safeguarded discoveries so extraordinary that history itself tried to erase them. Reality, however, is often even more fascinating than legend. Our story begins in 331 BC. Alexander the Great had just conquered Egypt. Rather than establishing yet another military stronghold, Alexander envisioned a city unlike any the ancient world had ever known. A crossroads of civilizations, a gateway for trade, and ultimately, a beacon of knowledge. A city that would become the intellectual capital of the ancient world, Alexandria. Although Alexander died before seeing his dream fulfilled, his successors transformed the city into something extraordinary. The Library of Alexandria was far more than a building. It was part of a massive research institution known as the Mausion, a place dedicated to the Muses, the goddesses of knowledge. Here, within the Mausion lived an extraordinary community of scholars, mathematicians searching for universal truths, physicians studying the human body, poets preserving culture through words, astronomers mapping the heavens, philosophers asking questions that still challenge us today. Together, they pursued a single purpose: to understand the world. Yet one remarkable detail is often overlooked. The library didn't simply wait for knowledge to arrive. It actively searched for it. Every merchant vessel entering Alexandria's harbor became an opportunity to expand the greatest collection of learning the world had ever seen. Every ship entering Alexandria's harbor was searched. If sailors carried books, officials confiscated them immediately, not to destroy them, but to copy them. The original often stayed inside the library. The owner received the copy. Imagine arriving at a foreign port and having your books permanently taken away by the government. That's how obsessed Alexandria was with knowledge. Imagine walking into a place unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Not a palace, not a temple, but a monument to human curiosity. No one knows exactly how many scrolls were stored inside the Library of Alexandria. Ancient sources estimate anywhere between 40,000 and more than 700,000 scrolls. The real number remains one of history's greatest mysteries. But one thing is certain: never before had so much human knowledge been brought together beneath a single roof. For centuries, no institution would rival its ambition. It stood as a monument not to power, but to curiosity. Scrolls alone do not change history. People do. And within these halls worked some of the most brilliant minds civilization has ever produced. Some of history's greatest minds walked these halls. Euclid, the father of geometry. His mathematical principles are still taught more than 2,000 years later. Eratosthenes, the man who calculated the circumference of the Earth, using nothing more than shadows, sticks, and brilliant reasoning. His estimate was astonishingly close to the modern measurement. Then came Aristarchus of Samos. Centuries before Copernicus, he proposed something revolutionary. The Earth might actually orbit the Sun, a theory so far ahead of its time that almost nobody believed it. But here's the question historians still debate today. If ideas this advanced already existed, what else might have been hidden inside those walls? Many people imagine the library as nothing more than shelves of old books. The reality is even more remarkable. These shelves preserved ideas that transformed medicine, astronomy, engineering, navigation, and mathematics. Knowledge that would influence generations long after the authors themselves had disappeared. Inside these scrolls were discoveries that shaped civilization itself. Medicine, engineering, navigation, astronomy, mathematics. Some historians believe inventions were recorded there long before they became widely known. Others argue the library preserved knowledge from civilizations that had already vanished. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, perhaps even cultures whose names have been lost forever. Every new scroll expanded humanity's understanding of the world. The library wasn't preserving the past, it was creating the future. Knowledge was so valuable that the rulers of Egypt became obsessed with collecting it. Every ship entering Alexandria's harbor was inspected. If officials discovered books, they confiscated them immediately. Teams of scribes copied every scroll by hand. The copies were returned to their owners. The originals stayed inside the library. From a modern perspective, the policy seems astonishing. Imagine arriving in a foreign country today, only to have every book you carried carefully copied, and the originals permanently added to the world's greatest library. That was the price of entering Alexandria. Imagine landing at an airport today, only to have every book in your suitcase permanently taken by the government. That was everyday life in Alexandria. The Ptolemaic kings wanted one thing: to own the world's greatest collection of knowledge, at any cost. But despite all this effort, something unimaginable was about to happen, and it wouldn't happen only once. History tells us the library may have faced destruction. Again, and again, and again. Most people have heard a simple story. Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt. A fire broke out during the fighting. The flames spread. The library disappeared forever. It's a story that seems to explain everything. Dramatic, memorable, almost too perfect. The problem is, history rarely offers such simple answers. There's only one problem. History isn't that simple. Ancient sources disagree. Some mention damage, others remain completely silent. And many historians now believe the famous fire may never have destroyed the entire library at all. So if Caesar wasn't responsible, who was? For centuries, one name has been blamed for the destruction of the Library of Alexandria: Julius Caesar. It's a story repeated in books, documentaries, and even Hollywood films. But history is rarely that simple. In 48 BC, Caesar found himself trapped in Alexandria during a brutal civil war. Facing defeat, he made a desperate decision. He ordered his own fleet to be set on fire. The flames spread across the harbor. Warehouses burned. Ships exploded. Smoke covered the city. Yet one crucial question continues to divide historians. Did Caesar's fire actually consume the library itself? Or has history blamed the wrong man for more than 2,000 years? Did the fire actually reach the library? Some ancient writers claimed thousands of scrolls were destroyed. Others mentioned warehouses near the harbor, not the library itself. Even more surprising, some historians writing just decades later never mentioned the library burning at all. If the greatest library on Earth had vanished overnight, why would so many eyewitnesses remain silent? Modern historians believe Caesar's fire probably caused damage, but perhaps only to part of the collection. The library may have survived, at least for a while. Not every civilization collapses in a single catastrophic moment. More often, great institutions fade quietly, year after year, generation after generation, until almost no one notices they're gone. Sometimes, civilizations fade away slowly. The library depended on royal funding. It depended on scholars. It depended on peace. As Egypt changed rulers, wars erupted. Political instability grew. Economic problems spread across the empire. Little by little, the world's greatest center of knowledge began losing its strength. Not because people stopped loving knowledge, but because survival became more important than scholarship. By the 4th century AD, the Roman Empire had changed dramatically. Christianity was becoming the empire's dominant religion. Many pagan temples were closed, some were destroyed. Among them stood the Serapeum, a magnificent temple closely connected to the Library of Alexandria. In 391 AD, the temple was demolished. Some historians believe valuable collections of books were still stored there. Others argue most of the library had already disappeared centuries earlier. Archaeology provides only fragments. Ancient texts often contradict one another. The surviving evidence leaves us with possibilities, but very few certainties. And that uncertainty is exactly why the mystery still survives today. One of history's most famous legends claims the library finally met its end during the Arab conquest of Egypt. According to the story, when General Amr ibn al-As captured Alexandria, he asked the Caliph Umar what should be done with the books. The answer supposedly was chilling. If these books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are dangerous. According to the legend, the scrolls were burned to heat the city's bathhouses for months. It's an unforgettable story, one that has appeared in countless books and documentaries. Yet almost every modern historian reaches the same conclusion. The account was almost certainly written centuries after the events it describes. Almost every modern historian believes it was invented hundreds of years later. There is no contemporary evidence that it ever happened, so who destroyed the Library of Alexandria? After centuries of research, excavations, and debate, The most honest answer remains surprisingly simple. We don't know. The library may not have been destroyed in a single night. It may have vanished gradually, through wars, political upheaval, religious conflict, neglect. Sometimes history doesn't end with a single blaze. Sometimes it fades, one forgotten page at a time. Perhaps Caesar damaged part of it. Perhaps later wars destroyed even more. Perhaps religious conflict erased what remained. Or perhaps the library didn't die in one single catastrophe. Maybe it died the same way civilizations often do. Slowly, piece by piece, generation after generation. Not with one great fire, but with centuries of neglect. Sometimes, history doesn't disappear overnight. It simply fades away. The greatest tragedy of the Library of Alexandria wasn't the destruction of a building. It was the disappearance of ideas. Thousands of works vanished. Many were copied nowhere else. Many were never mentioned again. Some may have contained discoveries. We will never know. Not because they were wrong, but because they simply didn't survive. Sometimes history isn't erased by enemies. Sometimes it disappears because no one is left to remember it. But what if some of those lost scrolls contained ideas centuries ahead of their time? Popular legends often claim the library contained impossible knowledge, machines beyond imagination, lost civilizations, secret technologies. The evidence doesn't support those extraordinary claims, but the truth is still remarkable. Ancient scholars had already calculated the Earth's size. They studied anatomy, developed sophisticated mathematics, observed planetary motion, created detailed maps, designed ingenious mechanical devices. Every generation builds upon the knowledge of the last. When knowledge disappears, progress slows, not because humanity forgets how to think, but because each generation must begin again. And yet, perhaps the library's greatest legacy was never its books. The physical library disappeared. Its idea did not. Today, every library, every university, every archive, every museum carries part of its legacy, the dream of gathering humanity's knowledge and preserving it. For future generations, the Library of Alexandria became more than a place. It became an ideal, one civilization sharing knowledge with the next. Because the greatest question isn't who destroyed the library, it's whether we're protecting our own knowledge today. The Library of Alexandria remains one of history's greatest mysteries, not because we know nothing, but because we know just enough to understand how much has been lost. Its walls may have vanished, its scrolls may have turned to ash, but its purpose lives on. Every time we preserve knowledge, question accepted beliefs, or search for the truth, we continue the work that began here, more than 2,000 years ago. Perhaps that is the library's greatest legacy, not the books it held, but the curiosity it inspired. History is filled with mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. If you enjoyed this journey into the Library of Alexandria, subscribe to Hidden Chronicles History. Every week we explore forgotten civilizations, lost empires, ancient mysteries, and the true stories that shaped our world. Now tell us in the comments, what do you think was the greatest piece of knowledge humanity may have lost forever? Until next time, remember, every civilization leaves behind secrets,